did we support 55 million buffalo on the Great Plains and still build a topsoil level of 12 feet? How did we do that?
Hello, my name is Ria Windcaller, and I am the producer and Cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world.
Hip hip hooray!
Bringing us into this here episode 391 of Cider Chat, you heard from Bill MacKentley of Saint Lawrence Nurseries. Based in New York State, up on the border there of Canada, maybe about an hour from the border. There's a little bridge over there, and then you could pop up to Ottawa. So that's pretty far up there in the U.S., and of course you have the Saint Lawrence Seaway between the Canadian line and the U.S. line. It's just a spectacular country up there. But that's not where this recording came from. This recording with Bill, talking about how the earth could have supported, I think he said like 5 million buffaloes or something like that, and 12 feet of topsoil. I enjoyed the project of editing this piece for all of you out there in Ciderville because there is so much depth to what he's saying. And because of that, your listening ear is going to have to be really fine-tuned to follow along. Bill didn't start out at the Saint Lawrence Nursery. It actually was a parcel of property that was owned by a different person, and his name is Fred Ashworth. And he initially started like a hobby and experimental station at this site. And then Bill MacKentley met Fred. What I have from online, I didn't really hear this from Bill himself, but they met in 1971 and they developed a long, relationship. And then Fred passed in 1977, and that was when Bill and his wife Diana purchased the land. And the town is actually called the town of Potsdam, New York. The Saint Lawrence Nurseries is really well known for having cold, hardy plants. So these are plants that grow in a zone that most other nurseries don't necessarily address. And then they were looking at kind of turning it over. Luckily, a guy by the name of Connor Hardiman and his wife Alyssa. Connor had been working at the nursery for a long time and didn't want to see it just, go to something else that might not really be keeping that thread from Fred Ashworth to the MacKentleys. And so in 2015, Connor was able to continue on with the stewardship of the Saint Lawrence Nurseries. And it was Connor and Alyssa who were able to get Bill down to New York Apple Camp this past summer of 2023, where he gave this talk. And it has a bit to do with buffalo and, of course, climate change and his history and some of the people who inspired him. So you're in for a treat. And again, I'm going to encourage you to really put on your listener ear. This guy has an amazing history, a lot to be said, and a really powerful way. You just feel his passion, his knowledge bank, and his wisdom. These are folks within our communities that are so important to, one, get their stories as much as possible, which I feel Cider Chat is able to do, thankfully, and just respect what they know from the past and bring it to the future. We don't have to keep on reinventing the wheel, and can see that there is so much to be gained. And really from a generation of folks who were those back-to-landers, the 60s and 70s folks who came out of that era have provided such an amazing resource of skill sets, knowledge base, and also actual research projects, not just resources, but research projects, and a lot of fails. a lot of fails along the way, which is absolutely invaluable. You cannot get that out of a book. It takes hours and hours, ups and downs, ebbs and flows, successes and failures, and coming back to the drawing board over and over again to get to the point where someone like Bill MacKentley, who has impacted so many people's lives to the better because of all the great plantings that he's enabled, and now has passed this forward to Connor and Alyssa, which from my perch gives me another silver lining in a world that often feels upside down. I hope it does the same for you. And that's what you have to look forward to in this here episode, number 391 of Cider Chat. We're going to begin with a little news from out and about in Ciderville, and then talk a little bit about the folks who are helping to sponsor this here podcast. And that does have to do with CiderCon coming up. And then we'll be getting to the featured presentation with Bill MacKentley of Saint Lawrence Nurseries. The French Cider Tour is rolling out September 22nd to the 28th. We begin in Paris, where we meet, spend the first evening there getting acclimated. Then on Monday, we head out into Normandy to Pédoge specifically, and that's where the Route du Cider is. We make a number of beautiful stops there, have a traditional Norman buffet, spend an evening in the harbor town of Honfleur, which is just, it's like romantic fairy tale like. And I'm traveling alone, and the romance and walking in the gardens and along the harbor and window shopping, and the actual hotel we stay in is gorgeous. We'll have our first cider dinner Monday evening with our friend Agathe Lettier. Day one is with 3 premier cider makers, and of course I'll be telling you more about this entire itinerary, talking your ears off, no doubt, because it's nice to share the good news about a particular region as you get to explore it more. And that's what I've been able to do in France, to be able to lead these tours for you. So do stay tuned. You never know if the folks who are on the waiting list can actually attend. So there is still time for you to put your name on the waiting list and keep in the loop on the upcoming tour. You can send that email to info@ciderchat.com. Let us know how many people you are thinking about. Of course, singles are welcome. I'm traveling single, and there's many other folks too. So it's all good. Don't be shy. Totally Cider Tours with me and some fun-loving folks coming up September 2024. This episode of Cider Chat is partially sponsored by the American Cider Association, who coming up in January 2024 is hosting CiderCon in Portland, Oregon. Cider tours take place January 15th and the 16th, and I want to zero in on one particular tour going up to the Olympic Peninsula. The actual overnight stay is at a historical park, and that's called Fort Worden Historical Park, and it's kind of one of those like special spots in the universe where you look at a map and you say, wow, if I could only go to that point there. Well, in this case, a whole bunch of you are going to be able to go to that point there on the map. It's on the eastern part of the Olympic Peninsula, the very northern section though. And so you're in the Port Townsend Bay area. So if you look at the map of Washington State and you see Seattle, and to the west there's Whidbey Island, and then you're looking out towards the Olympic Peninsula. They have a lot of ferries. There's so much water in that area. It's just teeming with energy, the good flows, the good vibes in so many ways. I see it, I feel it for folks that I know who live there and having visited. Really going to be an outstanding tour. If you haven't signed up for one yet, do consider that, or the tour going to Seattle. Both encompass cideries along the way. And one of the things to think about, besides the thrill of going to these areas and the excitement of visiting cideries and partaking in that experience, getting the terroir of that region, there's also the added benefit that you're going to be hanging out overnight with a bunch of fellow cider folks off the beaten path in like a setting where there's going to be extra bottles like tucked away. I would bring some if I was going. And what an opportunity to connect and have that full conference experience where you are sharing this once in a lifetime memory. As someone who leads tours, I know that this can create lifelong friendships. Find a buddy, connect with people and try something new. So CiderCon, once again, the tours kick off January 15th and the 16th, and then the main conference starts rolling out on Wednesday, the 17th. And of course, Wednesday evening, there's a cider share. And then Thursday, Friday, 2 full days of wonderful seminars and a trade show with vendors. They're really, really up in the game each year with the trade show. If you are in the trade, if this is something that you are passionate about, learning about cider, wanting to maybe start a cidery, this is the go-to conference each year, hosted by the American Cider Association. Find out more by going to ciderassociation.org and register today. Up next is our feature presentation pre-recorded at New York Apple Camp 2023 with the founder of Saint Lawrence Nurseries, Bill MacKentley. He's going to be speaking a little bit about his history and intertwining that with his thoughts on climate change and also those who have really led the charge in soil ecology and regenerative agriculture, and the impacts that it's obvious it has made on him. This is a bountiful presentation. It's time to tune up your ear, grab a glass, sit back, and enjoy this presentation. I give you Bill MacKentley.
I've always wanted to be a farmer my entire life, but I can't grow anything but potatoes and peas. No way you're going to grow tomatoes when your last frost is the 5th of July and your first killing frost or the 15th of August oftentimes. Yeah, I've seen frost every month of the year in the central Adirondacks. Temperatures have risen, and in 1980 or 1981, the articles appearing in research, and I was following the research about things going on with our climate. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. Cornell did some amazing research that showed that the previous 40 years have been the best 40 years in the history of agriculture in the world. But they could guarantee only one thing. 40 years had ended, and we were returning to normal. And we were returning to normal, though we did not know it. A new normal on steroids. Because this was before climate change was understood. This was several years before Bill McKibben wrote his famous End of Nature book. And I gave a climate change workshop, and I said, okay guys, we're going in a new direction. And nobody probably believed me because it was business as usual. And I was looking around, and I knew where we were going because I could see 50 years into the future. And I hate to say it, and I'm sorry that it happened, but we're going in a direction that we got to get our act together. And either lessons to be learned from growing trees and shipping them around the world for 50 years from a very far northern climate. Our customers were in Ely, Minnesota, International Falls, Minnesota, Montana, eastern Montana, Havre, Montana, all across the northern tier, the upper peninsula of Michigan, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. Our first couple of years, we supplied John, what a wonderful guy, and the newly forming Fedco trees. We had trees, but he said, Bill, we want to bring everything in state, and we can grow things that you can't grow. Remember, Maine is apple country. Northern New York, it's icicle country. We bring your cows in at night.
Bill is referring to John Bunker of Fedco Trees. And coming up, he's going to be speaking about Fred Ashworth. As I mentioned earlier, had this land where Saint Lawrence Nurseries is as his own, It was his hobby spot, if you will, an experimental station to do work with apple trees and scion and wood as such. And it was he, I believe, that really inspired Bill to take this path, to really move forward and take the nursery to another level, or actually create Saint Lawrence Nurseries as it is a business. So he's going to be referring to Fred here, and you will then hear how Fred made it possible for Bill to acquire this land.
Fred had spent many years going around after the 33-34 kill-off, gathering what trees remained and studying it very, very closely. He was born in 1898, and as a young boy, he was eating things like Tallman sweet and learning about Mr. Tallman that came to visit Dad the night before. Are you related to the Tallman of the famous Tallman sweet? Well, yes, I am, son. So he was inured into this whole culture of apples at a very, very young age. He was also a great plant breeder. He didn't breed just apples. He bred potatoes for Iceland. He bred all kinds of vegetables for some of the early seed companies. In the early 1920s, he started to probably he could sell a few trees that he grafted. He probably got 50 cents for his first trees. And when I came along in the early 70s, I said to Fred, I want to work with you. I want to do this. I'm changing my career. And he said, well, if you do this, I'll give you an acre of land.
Through an acre of land, Bill was able to do his work, and as he puts it,
the nursery continued. This new location in the Potsdam place was about 30 miles from Heuvelton, and Fred kept it going and said, I'll give you an acre of land on my property in Potsdam. It's a 50-acre piece. We lived out of our little pickup, sold bicycles for a year or so, tried to get some money ahead. My father was a builder. He was a great, gifted carpenter way back in the woods. I think I inherited some of that because I knew how to frame a house. I knew how to scrounge. You realize how much stuff we throw away in this society? I think there should be a law that prevents that. Okay, let's get back to what I want to talk to you guys about. I'm trying to lay out a picture of just how cold we are. When you guys down here can get a tree, an apple tree, this big in 2 years, that's unheard of in St. Lawrence County. That's unheard of. We cannot do that. So that means everything is under much greater stress. And those test winters are far more frequent up where we are. And you see the effects of them frequently.
We have meandered back to the topic at hand, all around climate. And in this case, Bill is discussing what is called test winters. Very, very, very low temperatures.
I don't think we've had a true test winter in 40 years, maybe 50 years. In 80-81 was the last really decent, maybe that should be a question mark behind that, test winter we had. Now you're being visited by changes in climate, and what is causing changes in climate, some of the effects are, of course, CO2 that we are putting into the atmosphere. Humans have done this. We know what to do. We went back to the land in the 70s. We learned how to grow because our forebears were not farmers anymore. My father was a builder, of course, he lived up in, I wanted to be a farmer as a kid, but what am I going to grow at Mount Airy? He wasn't likely to grow anything except snowflakes. What can we do? Plants are non-motile.
Motile meaning to be able to move or self-propel.
We are motile. We can run inside a building and we can start a fire and keep warm. Plants cannot do that. We can make them healthier. Using our organic methods, we began to learn a lot of stuff. We began to learn a lot of things about it. One of the things is in our catalog, we always had a section on books. And I kept trying to find for years, I bought, I think, every book ever done on soils. And you know what? Every goddamn book out there was more boring than the last that dealt with soil. I'm sorry if there's any geologist or agronomist in the area. I don't mean to offend you, but they are boring. They talk about, well, what's this zone so-called? This is zone B, or this is zone... And it never dealt with the biology of vine. It never dealt with the biology of what was going on there. Along comes Elaine Ingham.
Bill is referring to Dr. Elaine Ingham here. She is considered as one of the foremost soil biologists, and you could find out more about her at soilfoodweb.com. There is a link to her website in the show notes.
Elaine Ingham came up with the concept of the soil food web. When she was a young graduate student in the early 70s in the agronomy department at the University of Colorado in Denver, and she said, I want to study, she went to every single member of the faculty and said, I want to study this life that's in this soil. And you know what they all said to her? There's nothing there. Yeah, oh, that's okay, I'll still study it. And she did. And she found out that there was not just something there was more there than she could possibly imagine. Enter a whole new field. In 1890, they discovered this strange thing on planet Earth. They named it mycorrhizal fungi. How many people have heard of mycorrhizal fungi? I think probably everybody in here. Nothing was done. It was not. I took one course, well, a couple of courses, in botany in college, and plant physiology, there was one mention of this thing called mycorrhizal fungi. They had no idea what it could do. It is nature's internet that's coming by. How many people know the work of Paul Stamets?
Bill is referring to Paul Stamets, who has authored many books, starting in 1978 with psilocybe mushrooms. Then I believe the next one was in 1983, The Mushroom Cultivator. Then we have Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms in 1993, Psilocybe Mushrooms of the World in 1996, in 2002, Micromedicina, and in 2005, Mycelium Running. Most recently, you could watch his movie called Fungi Perfecti. I believe it's on one of the streaming channels online. There'll be links to Paul Stamets' work in the show notes.
It will blow your mind. He put out 4 or 5 books, one called Mycelium Running, which is a classic book. It's now 20 years old. And it shows exactly what they can do. They can move energy. Christine Jones has got a great website.
Dr. Christine Jones is an internationally renowned and highly respected ground cover and soil ecologist. There'll be links in the show notes to her work for this here episode 391.
Clearly she shows how they work. 40%, and I'll use this term even though you've not heard of it, it becomes readily knowledgeable what it's all about. It's called photosynthate. Plants produce photosynthate. That's the liquid carbon that can be sequestered into the soil. And why is it sequestered into the soil? Because it carries the bonds between carbon and hydrogen, and there's energy stored in those bonds. And that material can be put into the soil to form long-term carbon in the soil. Held long-term, held for up to thousands of years. Where do we have an overabundance of carbon? Right now. In the atmosphere, exactly. And David C. Johnson, who came up with the Johnson-Sioux digester. I have a couple of them going right now. Fungally dominated compost on our land. You can increase the biological productivity by 4 to 5-fold. In fact, you can sequester carbon at a rate that would take into all the human-generated carbon put into the atmosphere to this point in time. In fact, the only way to sequester carbon, the only place left, is in the soil, because agricultural soils are deficient in carbon. Where does the carbon go? Probably you could never guess. Soils of the Midwest are 12 feet of topsoil. Remember how long they told you in high school how long it took to create an inch of topsoil? It took 1,000 years. It can be done very quickly and very proficiently by the use of mycorrhizal fungi, transmitting the liquid photosynthase from the plant, either trees or herbs or forests, or they do into the bacterial bodies. What runs this planet? Energy runs it, and it comes in the form of energy. The energy can then be delivered by the form of the liquid photosynthase to the bacteria. The bacteria can take the inherent existing things like nitrogen and potassium and all these minerals that we buy to put on our ground. It's put into a form which is perfectly usable, productively useful by the plants. That's where the trade comes in. That's where the trade-off goes. These are aspects of a new science that's come about. It started with the organic people. I was at the NOVA conference many years ago.
Bill is referring to the Northeast Organic Farming Association and one of their annual conferences. They've been providing conferences for the past 50 years, I believe, and for short, everyone calls it NOFA. You can find out more at NOFA, that's NOFA.org. Again, there'll be links in the show notes.
When Robert Rodale gave his great talk on regenerative agriculture.
Bill is referring to Robert Rodale, who is best known for his work with regenerative agriculture. Unfortunately, he went to Russia and he died there in a car accident, which ended that movement for a short while, but the Rodale Institute is still going strong now. And again, there'll be links in the show note to that institute.
But he was on to something, because while organic farming, and those of us was really fantastic at building soil, there were other aspects to regenerative agriculture than just the organic farming. And those aspects are illuminated very wonderfully in a lay book written by a guy named Gabe Brown. Gabe Brown is a farmer in North Dakota where he gets 12 inches of rain a year.
12 inches equals 30 centimeters. And just to put this in perspective, the average rainfall in Massachusetts per year, and I don't know what is average anymore, to be frank, but we'll just say average, is 45 inches or 114 centimeters. So what he's referring to here is just how dry that area of South Dakota can be.
That's almost dryland agriculture. Not quite, but almost. So it's pretty darn dry. He and his wife bought her parents' farm, which was 12 or 1,400 acres. Letting the grass be was actually a benefit. And he began to explore that benefit because he began to see after 4 or 5 years carbon levels coming up in the soil. Now, when carbon levels coming up in the soil, this means it can hold moisture. More moisture than it can hold without that carbon. And he is now on his 5,000 acre farm, reached levels of 12 to 14% carbon. They did have a freak 8-inch rainstorm one year, and the neighbor's land was flooded for weeks afterwards to a depth of 6 or 8 inches. His land was bare. With the penetrometers, they were able to say, well, you could drive an 18-wheeler about 40 tons right out across that field and it would never sink an inch. Now that's holding capacity. He began to put together, I don't want to grow corn, or I don't want to grow just money. I want to grow biology. Because with biology will come all the other things that make life possible on the planet. And he's been incredibly successful. He's growing 8 to 10 times the amount of organic feed on his farm, and he integrates animals in his system. And I think we can integrate animals carefully.
Bill continues on with a story about his wife, Diana, who always wanted to farm, and then met Bill, and they had a farm, and they had cows. And more recently, she said, I can't have cows anymore. They're just too big. You know, they could push you around. So they decided to get some goats, and they now have 2 goats, and it seems to be very successful. He's going to continue on talking about their orchard.
We have an orchard. It's about 200 to 300 trees. My orchard is one variety per tree. We have brought cows into the orchard. Never, ever, ever, ever bring cows into an orchard if there's apples on the tree. because they will remember. And the next year, when you let them out, they're going like this.
Bill's moving his neck up and down as if a cow is rubbing an apple tree, and an apple tree up against a 1,000-pound-plus cow. Well, the cow's going to win.
That's the end of that branch. You think deer are bad, watch out. Now, I think cows, goats, and sheep can be used for relatively short periods of time. At the right season of the year, you do another aspect of regenerative agriculture. You do timing. And you get the animals in, and you get the animals out. And as soon as they're out, then you bring something else in. It's all about timing. And that's the, get into things like armor on the soil. This is what Dave considers the second. Now, we don't have to worry about that as much here. We live in the Northeast. We have lots of rainfall, we have lots of green matter. In most of the world, you get a crust forming. Every desert on the planet is increasing. It's increasing at a rather dramatic rate, especially things like the places like the Sahara. The Sahara has moved downward tremendously, many miles since the 60s. And the crust that forms tends to repel water. So when they do get their infrequent rains, the rain runs off. It does not go in. There's thought. So where does the carbon go that's already there? Temperatures on the surface of that ground can reach 150 degrees, not uncommonly. You think that's a really high temperature, but that's not uncommon. To reach 3 feet over in a 6-inch grass, the temperature will be 70 degrees. That's within the life zone. That's fine. You can deal with that. But you can't deal with 150 degrees. You'll degrade. And you'll degrade the soil. And where does the carbon go for my second time to ask that question? It goes up there. It goes into the atmosphere. So we put carbon into the atmosphere. Agriculture puts a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. Probably as much as cars do. Think about that. But remember what I said. The oceans can't take any more carbon. They've taken all they can possibly take. They're full. The estuaries can't take any more carbon. They're full. What is left on planet Earth that can sequester carbon? Agricultural lands. Now, that comes not just from the sun degrading the topsoil, but it comes from the fact that with farming, we use fertilizers and we use herbicides. And there's another name for those things, poisons. And I remember I didn't want to use poisons on the land because I didn't want to see my kid 20 years later die of leukemia or some stupid thing. These are things that nature has never seen. And it turns out they have rather insidious effects on living systems. They're antithetical to nature. When you put NPK on a fertilizer on, the plants stop taking up nutrients that are readily available because here's this new stuff that just floated in and I can just take that. So, end of story. No more translocation of material from the mycorrhizal fungi to the bacteria to the plants. That's done. When you put herbicides on, you kill them. You kill the plant material because what you'll find is the outer casing of, I don't know if that's a good term, the outer membrane around mycorrhizal fungi is made out of the same stuff the outer wall of most insects is, and the method of action of most pesticides is to break down that wall to kill the insect. You put it on the apple tree to run off, and now you're killing all the mycorrhizal fungi in your orchard. These are testing and stressing your trees. So you've got to create an environment It does not stress the tree. You've got to increase the carbon level in your soils, in your orchard. And I think that can be one of the interesting things that they do is try to Gabe has done his third aspect of regenerative agriculture is to increase biodiversity. And he was told one time, he was advised, if you really want to do this, an old farmer told me, sell all your equipment. Sell your hay equipment, sell your baler, sell your mower, sell your conditioner, sell everything. And buy one piece of equipment. Don't sell your tractor though. You need that. You've got to build a fully equipment. And buy a no-till seeder.
Bill is saying no-till seeder, and that is a piece of farming equipment that you are basically using without any need to till up the soil beforehand. You just place the seeds directly into a field.
Now, when no-till seeding came in, it was used only in conjunction with herbicides because they thought they needed it. That's all gone. That's 30 years in the past. Now, he could take and he could put seeds in. All kinds. He could run cover crops. And now he's running things like, I got a 40-acre piece of land that I'm going to grow corn on. Where does he get the corn seed? He doesn't buy it. He grows his corn seed. So every year he's got a source of corn seed. He's not buying GMOs, Roundup Ready, bullshit. He's not buying that stuff. He's not putting it on his land because he knows it's destructive to the soil creatures there. So, I'm only growing 156 bushels of corn per acre. Not like the 210 bushels that they get with the fancy new hybrids and lots of chemicals applied. But he says, I don't have the cost of seed. I don't have the cost of fertilizer. I don't have the cost of herbicide that is $100 a gallon. I don't have any of those costs. And the money that goes in my pocket is my money. When he's using that no-till seeder, by the time that corn is ready to come off, which he gets, he has understory of 20+ species of cover crops, forbs and legumes and grasses, is now this high. He brings in the cows. And one of the other aspects of it is, how do you manage those cows? How did we support 55 million buffalo on the Great Plains and still build a topsoil level of 12 feet? How did we do that? No, nature did that. How did we do it? Well, nature, Gaia came along. Gaia has done a great job of terraforming this planet, which was unlivable in the very beginning, but that's a whole other story. I can't get into that here today. Okay, he says, you know what I'll do? I'll come up with a creature, a big fermentation tank, 1,000-pound fermentation, and I'll give them little tiny feet that can poke into the ground and stomp into the ground. It would drive the manure that they do on a regular basis and all kinds of other things into the topsoil, and then get them the hell off. Now, how do we get them? Oh, I need 4-legged coyotes, and wolves, and things like that to slowly move the herds. This is what he came to understand was the only way to do it. You get them on for a very short period of time. You get them off for a long period of time. What happens then is when you allow the grasses, that cover crop, to be eaten down to, say, 5 inches or 6 inches, you still got armor on the soil. You still reach down to the ground level. That temperature is still 70 degrees. No 140 degrees. No degrading of material into the atmosphere. It's about the hydrology cycle. It's about water. You create the situations for water, and the water will come because you're now increasing it. What happened in California? What did we do wrong there? There was a national protection that guaranteed that the waters coming from the Pacific eastward would drop their load in the Central Valleys of California, where they grow almonds and all these nice things. What did we do? We cut off the 10-mile wide zone of big trees along the coast. And if you read things like the Climate Near the Ground, fantastic book, MIT Press, 1959. They go into all of this in great detail, very technical now. And they show clearly that if you create a windbreak, the wind, and it depends on the density of the windbreak, that means how dense the plant material is in that windbreak, how high it is. You can measure 4 times the height of those trees, and that's where your precipitation will begin to fall, which is in the Central Valley where it should be. Now, with those trees gone, the clouds simply rise, it's hotter and hotter, and they're pushed over the mountains. Hence, drought. And the problem, it could be solved in no time flat. Walter Johnny, who's an Australian that came to the United States, gave a series of lectures from California, at the University of California, all the way to Harvard. And he talked about these things, and I don't know if people paid attention. I'm trying to make you guys pay attention because you guys want to grow apple trees. Now, can you use no-till cedars in the orchard? I'm beginning to think that you could. Most of our orchards are set up on kind of some sort of road system that would allow you to take an 8-foot cedar through. You can start by putting all kinds of grasses in them. This is going to increase the resistance and the resilience of your apple tree in ways that you can't even imagine. You may not see it the first year. You might not see it the second year, but it will come. And it will come because you're going to be increasing the carbon levels of that soil. And trees, apple trees especially, all the fruit trees, they utilize mycorrhizal fungi. You actually may have trees that you've planted that have never been re-inoculated. It can happen, and it should happen, but there's no guarantee. And especially if you're using herbicides and artificial fertilizers, you're not going to get it back. You're creating, I believe, what you create in a good orchard is not a grassland, and it's not a forest. What is it? What do they have in East Africa? Savannas. You're creating a savanna. Oh, I got my savanna of apple trees. Well, why not? Edge effect is where it's at. We all know that. This has been well studied. Okay? So why not start right there? What about our solar panel farms? 3/4 of that land on those solar farms is unused. And everything that's of usefulness that's not the solar panel is below ground, wires and all that. You could sow them. Grasses only get maybe this tall. You could put 20, 30 different species. They all have a role to play. They all have some role in that web of life in making your tree stronger and more resilient. You think that animal systems and plant systems have the same molecules, say, for one atom by accident? Life is cooperative. Life is cooperative, works in a cooperative manner. It's engineered that way so that Earth could terraform the planet. In 2020, all these aspects of regenerative farming are coming together. We know more. We don't know crap. We don't know crap. But we know a whole lot more than we did 10,000 years ago, and a heck of a lot more than we did 50 years ago. And we now begin to understand what we have to do to make life viable for humans on the planet. I'm not sure we're going to make it, because I think the answer is going to be social change, which is going to be very hard to engineer. We've been taught to believe our entire lives, and now I'm finding that even in hard science, which I thought I could trust, there's very little I can believe anymore, because our systems don't allow for it. And now if we do something that's contrary to what is accepted science, you're considered a conspiracy theorist, and you're just relegated to the dumb heap. And that's very disturbing. But we have to resist. We have to continue doing it, because you know what? In the end, life is cooperative. Either we cooperate and help make the change, or nature will do it when we're gone. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
That was Bill MacKentley, pre-recorded at New York Apple Camp 2023. It was so interesting to hear about the people that inspired him and how he became part of Saint Lawrence Nurseries through Fred Ashworth's work and that relationship. And he didn't really speak about Saint Lawrence Nurseries today, but of course I mentioned that earlier with both Connor and Alyssa Hardiman, and that they are now taking that on and are the next stewards of the nursery. So that has to give you hope right there. And of course, this knowledge bank that Fred has and what he's offering to all of us is just outstanding. So if you've followed this far, congratulations for that, because I know the audio was not the best, but we do the best we can in these situations to get the word out. And if so, if that worked for you and you do like this episode, please pass the word along. Let other people know what Cider Chat is all about. And that will help this podcast and I think in turn Cider to keep going up. And with that, I leave you here. This is Ria Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
Do it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this. There is a reason why we drink it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Yeehaw!